Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Dorothy Grandia, and I'm the Associate Director of the Erasmus Center for Women in Organizations. I have been working for RSM since 2008, and for a good many years, I was working in career services, helping MBAs, executive MBAs, and global MBAs get their job after the MBA. As you can probably tell, I'm from the United States originally. I've been living in the Netherlands for 24 years now. You can learn how to speak Dutch. I am living proof. Ik ben levende bewijs. Eventually, you can learn how to speak Dutch, and you can actually enjoy life here, and especially on beautiful days like this. I think all of our guests will confirm that it is gorgeous weather today, but that doesn't diminish our interest in sharing with you. So I'm going to be the moderator today to let you know and introduce you about all of my colleagues who are here to kind of answer your questions and to give you insights into the RSM MBA programs and EQUO, and what do those two things have to do with each other, first of all, and especially what does that have to do with you and your career moving forward, and not just your career, but your leadership as a woman, why you matter. And to answer or discuss some of those questions tonight, we've got the Executive Director of the Erasmus Center for Women in Organizations, Hanneke Takkenberg, is here. Thank you, Hanneke. We have got Carla Bleckink, who I will introduce later, but she's graduated from one of the MBA programs and has quite a wonderful story to tell and a lot of insights about the practice of female leadership and gender balanced leadership and kind of leading that charge in a company. And finally, tonight we've got with us Associate Director of MBA Programs, Lida Dimitroiu. Welcome, one and all. We'll hear from Hanneke first, we'll hear from Carla, and then we'll hear from Lida. And then most of all, we're going to hear from you. We've got a lot of Q&A time. I'm going to ask that you take a look at the bottom of your screen, and you'll note that there are Q&A boxes and chat boxes. So if you have a question at any point, please put the question in the Q&A box. And when we get to the Q&A time, we're going to have a free-form discussion. So we can have questions to Carla, to Hanneke, and to Lida, to whoever around the MBA, around gender balanced leadership, around anyone's experiences. If you want to share a link or give feedback or a comment or an idea, please go ahead and put that in the chat box. And in fact, my colleagues, if they want to share a link, will do the same. Just to let you know, we are recording, so be aware of that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, the Executive Director of EQUO, and also, it took me a long time to memorize this title, Professor of Clinical Decision-Making in Cardio and Thoracic Interventions at the Erasmus Medical Center. Dr. and Professor Hanneke Takkenberg. Welcome, Hanneke. Thank you for coming this evening. And would you please answer the questions that I think are on women's minds about not just why is it important for me as an individual woman getting an MBA, going into leadership, that I think about gender, but in fact, and I know you are about the sisterhood above all. Why is it important for organizations, for businesses, and in fact for society to consider gender in leadership?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dory. And every time you say it so nicely, my title, I find it hard to say myself at certain point in time, I should say. But no, I'm more than happy to see, first of all, even though the weather outside is like wonderful, so many participants. And although I can't see you, I should say that I can only see the panelists from here. A warm welcome also from Erasmus Center for Women and Organization at Rotterdam School of Management. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is how we can move toward gender balanced leadership. At EQUO, as we say in short, EQUO, we are about redressing the gender balance in leadership. And we do this through research, through our programs, through our events, through mentoring and coaching, and also through our network that is supposed to connect and empower women. But why do we find this so important? And why is this so important? So I hope that many of you realize it is. And if you're not convinced yet, I hope to convince you tonight. Um, I'd like to start actually with a saying. And the saying is about diversity, and not only about gender diversity, but diversity in the broadest sense. They say that diversity is being invited to the party. And in that respect, you could translate that to that women are being invited more often in leadership positions in companies. That's diversity, I guess, representation. But there's also inclusion. That's a second important aspect when we think, also when we think of gender balanced leadership. And that's about being asked to dance at a party, not only being invited, but also invited to participate within the organization. Finally, and that's a big dream of mine, there is authenticity. And I hope that we as women leaders can all remain authentic to ourselves. And authenticity is not only being invited to the party and being asked to dance, but is also being able to choose the music to which we dance in our organizations, to truly lead from your own perspective. That quote is really so inspiring to me, so I repeat it every now and then to remind me that when it comes to gender balanced leadership, it's in representation, it's in participation, but it's also in leading, in having a gender balanced leadership in your organization. So, what I'd like to focus on today, this big question about how do we get towards gender balanced leadership, I think there's three questions that we need to answer. And the first one is why does gender diversity in leadership matter? Because in Dutch we say, well, it all seems to work. Het werkt toch? Why would we make all that fuss about gender? And that's a relevant question, I think, to answer. Second, I do think we should also ask the question, why are men still overrepresented in leadership positions rather than the other way around, why women are underrepresented? I think that's also an important question to ask. And thirdly, and then I really get to the core of things while Dory's cat is stepping on her shoulder. What can we do to create gender equality in ourselves, in others, and in the organizations that we work in? And hopefully also the organizations we intend to lead, because I truly believe you're all ambitious women who want to make a change there. So let's start with the first question. Why does gender diversity in leadership matter? You can take that question from different perspectives. I think the very well-known perspective is a social justice perspective, because it's fair. And why would women not have equal opportunities? We are more than half of the population and we deserve equal chances. Well, the bitter truth is that we're far from having equal opportunities. And so from a social justice perspective, indeed, gender diversity in leadership matters. We can also take an economical perspective. I think that's also important from a societal point of view. We represent half of the population. Our educational systems invest in us. And if we then cannot step to the plate as men do, then it's simply a loss of talent, and a loss of talent, not only a loss at an individual level, but also at a systemic level. Thirdly, I think there's definitely also a business case that we can mention here, because we know that if there is more gender balance in all layers of the organization, including in the leadership positions, and especially in the leadership positions, these companies simply do better. They have a better profit, they have a better return on investment, and we do know that diverse teams simply perform better. So these, I hope to convince you that all these three things matter: social justice, economical, but also the business case, and they actually complement each other. So I hope to explain to you why I think that gender diversity in leadership is so important, and why it's so important that you are stepping to the plate. Still, we need to ask ourselves, why in heaven's name are men still overrepresented in these leadership positions? And at Equo, and if you would attend one of our open evenings or open programs or courses, we will tell you more about a couple of important factors that play a role in the overrepresentation of men in leadership positions. There's first of all stereotypes, and the result of stereotypes is implicit and often also explicit bias against women. And finally, organizational culture plays an important role. If we take a closer look at stereotypes, let's take a look at gender stereotypes. You know, the stereotype of a man is dominant, a man is assertive, forceful, and takes charge. That's how you would stereotype, I guess, a man. On the other hand, women are usually stereotyped as being nice, friendly, socially skilled, and sensitive. And it's quite a difference. Of course, these are characteristics of people and not necessarily attached to a certain sex. But these are the stereotypes that we do carry around in our heads. And if you then take a look at stereotypes that have to do with leadership, try to take a look inside your head and think of what leadership stereotypes you can think of. Well, the ones that come to mind are somebody who's self-confident, assertive, takes charge, solves problems, inspires others. And then if you compare the male and the female leaders, the male and the female stereotypes to the leadership type, you see that men and leadership stereotypes simply match better than women and leadership stereotypes. We simply associate males more with leadership than we do females. And the consequence of that is male advantaging. That means that males will have better chances of advancing during their career simply because these stereotypes live in our head. The result also, and I think these stereotypes, they start around the age of 5 to 7 in young kids already. What happens is that we then run into this phenomenon of implicit bias and even explicit bias against women when it comes to leadership. Let me tell you another little story. As Dory said, I work in cardiothoracic surgery, and in my field that's very male dominated, these stereotypes also live. And so I was having dinner with a couple of surgeons in New York at a conference, some young surgeons from the Netherlands, 3 male surgeons, 3 female surgeons. And they asked me, well, Hanneke, we heard you have this strange hobby, you know, being a feminist and rooting for diversity. Why do you do this? There's no problem. And then I told them we were having dinner. It was a nice evening, a beautiful Italian restaurant. And I said, well, listen to this story. I'll tell you a riddle, and then perhaps you understand. So I told them the riddle of the surgeon. And you probably may know this riddle. It's about a man and his young son driving in their car through the night, and they get into a terrible accident. And the man, the father, actually dies in that accident. And the young boy has severe head trauma. And he's being rushed to the hospital and straight into the operating room because he requires neurosurgery. The surgeon steps in, takes a look at the kid, and says, I can't operate on this boy. It's my son. look around the table, and perhaps some of you know the answer to this riddle, but none of these surgeons did. They sit there looking at me and they're like, well, perhaps it's a gay couple. Uh, they came up with really strange relationships, but they couldn't figure out that actually the surgeon was the boy's mother. And that made me realize that this is so ingrained that even among surgeons, this stereotype and this implicit bias that's the result of this stereotype is really influencing the way that we think. We simply associate men more with career, for example, a surgical career, than we do women. And we can't envision a female surgeon. That really opened my eyes and theirs as well. So we're all biased. And I think that's something we need to realize. And that's another reason why men are still overrepresented in leadership positions. Finally, organizational culture is something that I do need to mention, and I think is also a very important reason why there are still so many men in leadership positions. And especially in those organizations that are more competitive, hierarchical, individualistic, and self sustaining, this is something that is really hard to change. On the other hand, in organizational cultures where there's more collaboration and team driven efforts, this is much less of a problem. And it is a problem, I should say, because in those organizations that are so competitive and hierarchical, it is usually the case that women and other people who are not the norm are excluded. And social safety is therefore also much less than it is in organizations that do embrace diversity, inclusion, and hopefully, eventually, authenticity. Let's go to the last question that I posed. What can we do to create equality in ourselves? Gender equality, but I guess my biggest wish is equality for all. And perhaps we should talk about equity there, but that's beyond discussion right now, I think. How can we achieve that in ourselves, in others, and in the organizations that we work for? Well, I do believe that gender equality entails three things: equal chances, equal pay, and a safe and inclusive working environment. And equal chances hopefully translate to equal representation. That's not always the case. I mean, we can have equal chances in recruitment and promotion and gender mainstream our HR processes, but we should also pay attention to retention, coming back to the organizational culture. Women and other people who do not fit the norm of organizations tend to leave these organizations sooner. So it's not only in getting into the organization, being invited to the party, it's also being invited to dance and being able to choose the music. That's so important. Equal pay is another thing that we need to address. The gender pay gap worldwide is really, in 2021, unbelievably high. And I do believe that this is something we need to continue to put on the agenda. And in some countries, it's becoming even mandatory. I expect that to become mandatory as well in the Netherlands and other EU countries pretty soon. Finally, an inclusive working environment, we can also work on that as women leaders, is to battle harassment and create what I call a culture of care. All these things, of course, we need to communicate very clearly and persistently. At EQUO, we state that women can lead from wherever they are, and they are change agents. Positive change starts, in my view, from within, so with yourself. So what can you do as an MBA student or as an MBA alumna, or somebody who has the ambition to enter a program, an MBA program? Well, I think these also come in the little things. Celebrate women's achievements, support each other, amplify each other, Make sure that your voices are heard and help each other. You are not alone. So creating a community or a sisterhood is so important. And that's something we really promote at RSM and particularly at EQUAL. Also, I think it's important to realize you can also, from whatever position, take action for equality and address inequality. Together we can make noise and we can move mountains. And I think we'll come to that a little bit later as well. So I hope to have told you a little bit more about what EQUO stands for and what we hope to achieve. And I hope it has inspired you. And I hope that you remember my little saying about diversity, inclusion, but also about authenticity, because that's the way to move to gender balanced leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanneke. And I invite all of you, if you have a question for Hanneke or a follow-up comment, put it now, please, in the Q&A. We will get to those questions later. And I was, thinking when I was listening to you, Hanneke, about what we were saying about the institutional working environments that women are in and why that sisterhood is so important, why that support is so important. And I know that in our programs at EQUO, we work in a lot of industries where women, particularly the higher you go up the management chain, just the air gets really thin. And sometimes it's just, you feel very alone as a woman, or at least the women that we work with. So without obligating anyone, I'm just curious to do a super fast little poll of everyone who's participating tonight. If you want to go to the chat, you aren't obligated to, but just give us an indication now in your team, in your department, however you want to define your working environment. What's the percentage of women there? Is it, you and 9 guys, or is it, 50-50? Just put in the chat box what you think. 15%. What do you think for the participants? What kind of another 15%? 50%, 30, me and 4 guys, 10%, 30, including a manager, 25, 5 to 10. Just learned today. That's interesting. Wonderful. Well, the reason I asked the question is because, not every organization is the same. Not every situation is the same. And to be honest, the strange thing that we're discovering is that both men and women, first of all, both men and women have bias. Bias is human. And both men and women act a little bit differently depending on whether it's, 50% men, 50% women in the team, or it's just one woman and a whole bunch of guys, or one guy and a whole bunch of women. And so in that way, when we're together with participants in our open programs, we get to learn a little bit from each other, not just from the faculty, but the participants walk through their own experiences and share. And that's why the sisterhood's so important. And I think, thank you for answering that. And I think it's a nice segue. I'm gonna shut this. This would, of course, be the time that my husband decides to do some weed whacking in the garden. I think it's a nice segue for me to introduce Carla to you, and a little bit more formally this time. Carla graduated from the Global Executive 1 MBA in 2015. I remember very fondly working with you then about your career and what you wanted out of the MBA. And you are now the manager of sales at Orangeworks Process Professionals. And I think, speaking of gender balance in your working environment, that you've probably experienced some different gender balance situations. And first of all, welcome and thank you, Carla. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for the introduction, Dorothy. It's a pleasure to join you in the session.
You know, when we were waiting to start the session, I was saying that you're really a good friend of Equo because you joined some of the programs, got to know us and Diane and Hanukkah, and then you've come back and you have cultivated that network, that sisterhood, that support that's so important among women. And I think that you've also seen a lot. So I wanted to start out by asking you, what kind of gender balance related things have you seen in your career?
Well, actually, I studied aeronautical engineering, and when I started my studies, I was rather naive. You know, I was like, there must be gender parity in the Netherlands because I had the same opportunities as the guys. Throughout my career, I have seen that actually society has accepted the inequality as a norm. So you don't really realize the inequality, but you know, the corporate world, it has been shaped and designed by men, and it really resulted in men benefiting from the rules of the game. Like also Hanneke actually already explained, like the male qualities are just more valued. They are paid for much more actually than the female qualities. Women are more society oriented. They do a lot more in childcare, sacrifice their careers. They also do a lot of voluntary work, while, you know, and these male qualities, the risk taking, the being confident, that's what is valued and paid in jobs. What I also found is that men are more often hired for the competence. So, you know, when they come across as promising, you know, they can learn on the job. Women are hired when they bring the full experience and you know, have gone through everything and mastered everything that is needed for the job.
So men are hired on their potential, and
yes.
women are hired more like when they check all the boxes for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and also these confidence in men is quite often mistaken for competence, really. So I have seen a lot of, well, at least quite some very confident men ending up in jobs that they were not really competent for. And on the other way around, I have seen women that were very competent actually not daring to apply for jobs that they, you know, didn't maybe not tick 100% of the boxes, but, you know, 95, and they still wouldn't, you know, apply for it or be chosen for it. If they applied for it, then not even get the job. So there is definitely a difference in how women and men are treated in the corporate world. For me, a very personal experience that was that I encountered, a very difficult issue. I once left a job because I was sexually assaulted by my manager on a business trip. At that time, I was working for a very renowned company with a very good image here in the Netherlands. And because of that good image, the issue had to be swept under the carpet. They'd rather sacrifice either me or him, and in the end it became me, instead of putting the reputation of the company to the test. So it's beyond the purpose of this session to actually elaborate on what really happened. I have been interviewed about this, and there is on Equo, there's a link. So if anybody encounters something in that field, feel free actually to read my story and reach out. I have no issues talking about it, but I won't elaborate on that right now. But actually this event led to my enrollment in one MBA, in the Global Executive MBA. That's why I actually mention it, because I quit the job. I in the end, I chose to quit, but it was not very voluntarily. And I struggled with it. I was a very ambitious person. I had my career well on track. And due to someone else's actions, I saw myself forced to leave. So I came in this downward spiral. And my partner at that time was doing the Global Executive MBA. And in him, he was extremely busy with assignments and all these international trips. But I saw the opposite. He was so vibrant. He had this energy and he was in this roller coaster of this MBA, all this excitement. And I was feeling down. But actually through him, I got in touch with the staff of the MBA and also with the people that later founded and staffed ECHO. At the time, ECHO didn't exist yet. It hadn't been founded yet, but I got in touch with the people and they were of great support. Yeah, because through ECHO, actually, I got coaching and that actually broke this negative spiral. And I became so enthusiastic, and I needed a little bit of investment in myself after this what had happened in my career. So actually, the Global Executive MBA was kind of a sabbatical for me. So I had a blast of a time, and I wouldn't have missed it in the world.
And of course, there's a whole personal leadership development aspect to the MBA, which is really about, a lot of it is about looking at your role in your own situation, your locus of control, how you relate with others, and how you relate with the organization itself. What did you come away with from that aspect of the MBA, the personal leadership development?
Oh, the personal leadership development, of course, a global MBA gives you a lot of hard knowledge, right? But the PLD was the subject that I actually learned most from. It really forces you to analyze yourself, to get to learn yourself, to actually know what makes you a happy person. It's very important actually to be in flow with yourself and in sync with your surroundings. And it's not necessarily this prestigious job or the expensive car or the lots of money. What I actually learned is what makes me happy, what makes me grow, what gives me the positive flow. In fact, of course, we need money to live, and I need a purposeful job. So what I learned from that is that the right job and spending the money that you earn on the right experiences, more experiences than things, that actually makes me a very happy person. It's that feeling of accomplishment. What I learned from PLD makes me a so much more accomplished person than I expected before I enrolled MBA. I expected to benefit from the hard knowledge, which of course I do. And also my career benefited from it, but there was so much next to it in personal growth as a person. And that was actually something that has had much more value in my personal life. It takes into account your personal life, your work life, your family life, everything. So
it's interesting because it was this story that sort of precipitated your need for a sabbatical and your interest in taking the MBA, and then you go to the MBA and really focus on you and what drives you, what you want. That's not only the external, it's also the internal. And so then you go back into work, not the same company, back into work. I assume that, like we all do, we all experience at some point, there's a difference between what we call harassment with a capital H and micro iniquities that you start to notice all the time about a gender imbalanced environment. How do you now that you're back in work for several years,
Yes.
how do you experience gender balance now? And how do you experience differently now that you have both been through personal leadership development, have become more of a leader through the MBA, but also your affiliation with EQUO probably open your eyes a little bit about how do you navigate that world now?
Well, actually, I realize also in the corporate world, the awareness for the importance of gender balance is really growing. It's for gender balance is growing, also for inclusion. The difference has been actually emphasized by Hanneke. It is growing, the importance of it, but it's very fragile. COVID, according to my opinion, has actually led to a setback, because all the professionals in healthcare, mainly women, they have taken the loads over, well, during the COVID period. They have done all the extra work. Mainly mothers have homeschooled their children, sacrificing their careers or their free time. And especially in care, women did not really get the reward. I mean, what did they get? They got applause, but not a salary rise, right? So,
It is crazy. People in healthcare,
yes,
not getting much of anything other than just people's appreciation.
Yes. So, well, that's, women quite often, because we are socially oriented and community oriented, we value this appreciation, but it should actually, for equality, we need monetary value. I mean, it should be paid. It should be really, really rewarded in order to get this equality. And already in 2015, the year that I graduated, so that's why I remember this, keep on remembering this. McKinsey Global Institute already wrote a report about how women's equality would add $12 trillion to global growth. So to me, having this focus on gender equality in the workplace it became something very important that I'm really, really very aware of. So what I do is I emphasize contributions, successes of female colleagues. And
amplification.
Yes, we need this amplification. I will not speak bad about a female colleague. I will not speak bad about women at all. That's something that Diane really taught me. I've joined her sessions over and over, and this sisterhood is truly very, very important.
For those of you who don't know, Diane Bevelander is the founder of EQUO and until recently the co-director with Hanneke.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So it is. But I also think, we can do our share. We all should do our share. I also think politics should step in. In the past, when I was really young, when I started studying engineering, I was against quota. I have changed my mind completely about this. If we leave it up to the corporate world to reach gender parity, it will take 200 years. It will take more than 200 years before we reach gender parity. So there should be some laws for equal treatment of women, equal pay. We have to cut the pay gap. Go to Intermediaire Salariskompas for the Dutch people. There is this website where you can actually check what your salary would be according to your qualifications. If you type in your qualifications, you get two graphs, one for men, one for women. It shows how ridiculous this is. So why should we be paid less for actually the same years of work experience? So I'm very much aware of it. And I think awareness is growing, but there's still a lot to be done.
Thank you. And I think at EQUO, what we really agree to is that one woman in an organization saying, hey, we should consider this cultural change, or we should consider this policy, you know, has a real uphill battle. Once you get women in an organization working together, you create a threshold for conversations around different initiatives that started kind of take the tailwind of the conversations, because I love the way you put it. It's definitely, there's starting to become more interest in talking about gender balance in leadership. But I love your word, it's fragile. It's fragile now.
Yes.
And building these coalitions of women in organizations who dare to really lead like you and just say, okay, we're going to get together, we're going to amplify each other, we're going to create a powerful network, we're not going to speak badly about each other, and we're going to start creating the conversation in our organization. I was on a discussion panel at INSEAD for gender balance in leadership, and this was a couple of years ago. There was a woman there from BCG, and they had done, BCG is a consulting company, they had done a investigation for the country of Denmark to find out what would be one of the, you know, the best ways they could address the gender imbalance in leadership. And their recommendation to the country of Denmark, mandatory parental leave for fathers.
Yes.
Make men stay home and take care of newborns.
Well, yeah, it's
That changes the conversation inside an organization almost instantly.
I can imagine. Yes, yes, absolutely. So it's like I said, there's a lot to be done. But women, if we get together and if we hold together, we can achieve a lot. Really, really a lot if we support each other. Yeah, that's one thing that I also have to highlight about the MBA, the sisterhood. I participated in a lot in the MBA. There were electives, but really the highlight of my MBA journey, that was participating in the Women in Leadership project. At that time, it was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and we were trained by Rebecca Stevens, the first woman who climbed the 7 summits. She trained us. She trained 20 ambitious women, all in MBAs or studying at Erasmus. And we climbed together Mount Kilimanjaro. We had to support each other. On that mountain, there was hardship. It was cold. We were climbing from plus 30 degrees to minus 20 when we summited. People were suffering from altitude sickness. There were people, you could barely drink or eat from headaches. And we held on to each other. And not all 20 reached the top of the mountain. Not everybody reached the summit, but those who did reached it together. We achieved it as one team. People were actually carrying each other's backpacks just to support each other. No one was running up front, just in order to summit. We held on together, and I still benefit from that great network of ambitious women that is still very, very strong. It was in 2014. But still, we regularly meet, we speak to each other, we support each other. There is still a lot of contact. And actually, in 2019, I climbed in Ethiopia with Rebecca Stevens, and also friends who also climbed Kilimanjaro. We were climbing in Ethiopia. We climbed to Rosh Hashan, the highest summit of Ethiopia. So I still benefit from the network that I built among these women in my MBA. And they are
Boy, networks are everything.
Yes, and
really
sisterhood really also. It's nice to have like-minded women. I'm surrounded by men every day, and I can work with them, but it is a relief at times, to speak to women, like-minded women. So, absolutely.
Well, wonderful. I wish we could continue talking with you. I want to save time for some Q&A. So thank you, Carla. And also another thing I enjoyed was how you were talking about, okay, the hard skills. That's what I went to the MBA for, and I didn't really know what the PLD was going to entail, and or the project work or the people you were, the kinds of groups you were in. And I think that's a wonderful segue to Lida, who's going to, thank you, Lida. I'm going to kind of expound a little more on what Carla's talking about, different for every program, of course, but still some elements are the same. There's like kind of hard learning, there's the personal leadership development, there's the project and group work, which in my time as a coach, we did a lot of team coaching. Boy, do you learn a little bit about diversity when you are in a team with people, 5 people, different backgrounds, different educations, different country origins, different industries, different everything. And you tell them, here, solve this problem together. So Lida, why don't you let us know what the program has to offer?
Thank you, Dorothy. And let me say from my side how excited I am to be part of this event. You see me keeping notes because what Hanneke and Carla and you are discussing about are so relevant for us as women. And there's not one equal event that I've participated without keeping notes and having something good come out of it. So to take it a step back, I wanted to say that thank you for introducing me as Associate Director of Full-Time MBA Programs earlier today. Actually, today is my first day on the job. So for the past 3 years, I had been working in admissions, talking to wonderful women across the world interested in pursuing an MBA at RSM. And something that did strike me was what you mentioned before, that sometimes women tend to doubt themselves. I can't count the times that I've talked to strong, capable, effective women leading teams, doubting themselves, thinking, is the MBA right for me? Could I make it? Will I have something to offer? So I would say yes to all the women that are participating in today's event and the ones that will watch the recording. It is a program that, as you correctly noted, works on so many different angles of a person's life. So yes, you have to work on your business skills and your hard skills. And yes, you do get to explore operations and strategy, and you get to customize the program based on your specific learning needs. You tap onto the expertise of RSM. We are a Triple Crown accredited program. So you definitely get the educational experience that you are expecting from an institution of RSM's caliber. At the same time, though, as Carla rightly mentioned, personal leadership development is a key, and for many women that have participated in our programs is life-changing. So through coaching or through group exercises, through role-playing games, you learn what your authentic leadership style is, what you mentioned, Dorothy, before, and also how to lead teams more effectively based on this style, as Hanneke mentioned earlier. Another thing, of course, is tapping on the network of people that are in the classroom with you. As you rightly mentioned, again, we have people from practically all different backgrounds, different industries, different functions, different ages and nationalities and locations where they're based. So when you go into this group work together and you attack, let's say, a business problem from different angles, you realize that there's more than one right answer. So my colleagues and I would be happy to talk to anyone who's interested about our MBA programs. We do have 3 MBA programs at the moment running at RSM, plus a joint program with Cologne. So we have a full-time MBA program starting every January, which has a 1-year duration. This is mainly designed for people that are willing to take a year of work and focus on their studies. Then we have 2 executive MBA programs. One is the part-time executive MBA that lasts 18 months. Again, has a January start and has a classroom of around 100 students. The average age there would be 35 with 10 years of experience, but practically we have completely different people participating in that. So from their mid to late 20s until their mid 50s in the program. And this is designed for working professionals that want to combine their studies and their work. And of course, we have the Global Executive MBA program, 21-month duration, similar to the one that Carla participated. And it has a September start, actually, and we are accepting applications until late August. And in that case, the program is more focused on more seasoned leaders, people that have at least 10 years of experience, 5 of which have to do with managing people. So it is a smaller group of participants, up to 40, focusing on more strategic leadership issues. So my colleagues and I will send a follow-up email after the end of the event with additional information, but just to say that we would be happy, all of us, to talk about whether an MBA program would be right for you or whether this is the right time, and help you through your thinking process.
I said, that's wonderful. And then I realized I was on mute. Thank you, Lita. Thank you very much. You know, the way that you were opening and talking about confidence, and in fact, you know, Carla addressed confidence and competence confusion, which is, as you know, Carla, my favorite topic. And Hanneke, you're aware of that element in bias. You know, I was just coaching mad numbers of MBA students and started doing some programming with what would become Equo. And my experience of how the women talked about their abilities and what would get them to, you know, take a risk, and how men talked about it was what led me to do that TEDx talk on confidence and how important it is in women, and how we need to take a little risk every once in a while and show our confidence, even if we aren't exactly sure exactly how everything's going to turn out. And that was just a particular joy to sort of get that experience and get the chance to start working now in something really important to me: women's leadership and women's voices. So to get back to the gender and leadership topic, I want to start out with the questions. From Claudia Rave, or Rave, I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly or saying your name correctly. I love the fact that there are so many women in leadership executive MBA programs now offered in Europe. Have you assessed if there is a bias derived from this postgraduate title? And Claudia, I'm going to clarify. Do you mean, do other people see any kind of programming you've done, whether it's an MBA or not, and say, oh, you've done a women's leadership program, and then you get to, because we do have in our experience in Equo programming, women worry a little bit that they become the feminist or something because they did a women's leadership program. So what are your ideas about that, Carla and or Hanneke? Is there bias around even associating yourself with women in leadership program, whether it's, you know, temporary or actually part of your education? And Claudia, if that's not what your question means, please let me know. Carla, would you like to field that one?
Yes. I don't think I don't encounter any bias in that field. I mean, I am seen in the company as a feminist, but my leadership is very much accepted. So no, I don't get. For me, there is no bias against this MBA and being part of this female leadership organization, if that is what you mean.
Okay,
I don't encounter anything. I only see it as positive because I act upon it, I follow up, I realize that more people are aware. They were skeptical in the beginning, but they realize more and more actually what is the case. So it creates awareness, if I speak for me and my surroundings.
I think in some ways this is where the sisterhood helps inside of an organization, because it's very difficult for people to say, oh, those 5 women over there, they're all about, no, they're actually about organizational and personal value of gender balance in leadership. And that leads me to the next question I'd like to give to you, Hanneke. How should, and this is from Chantal, how should we approach senior management to express our concerns on inclusivity?
Yeah, that's a good one. Before I answer that one, I do believe about the first question, there may be a bias and people may say, oh, you went through some sort of women's training, but I don't care actually. I think that has brought me so much and has made me realize that very importantly, we need to support each other and organize. I immediately started a women's network within my own organization after completing my women's leadership program. So I wouldn't think too much about it. If it feels good, go for it. And I guess that's also part of being yourself and not being driven by what others think. When it comes to the second question, how do we approach senior management to express our concerns? I think that's also perhaps something that we teach. It's change management. And it all starts with creating awareness and with creating a sense of urgency. And from that perspective, I think you should approach senior management. And in that, you should not be alone. I think you should form coalitions with relevant stakeholders within your organization when there are concerns about inclusivity. That's at least how I have approached it in my own organization. So my organization is an educational organization, scientific, but also clinical. So I make sure that I have stakeholders from all three, but also stakeholders from the different networks that are active within my organization. It's not only about the formal organization, it is also about the informal powers in your organization. And you should use them and collaborate with them and as a group approach senior management. Because there are a lot of concerns on inclusivity, especially recently, especially also coming out after the Me Too movement started. People are starting to speak up. Organizations need to adapt to that. And not only getting rid of unwanted behavior, but truly creating an environment where everybody is respected and has a voice and is being heard. So that's how I would approach it.
Thank you very much. And boy, are we getting questions from on all fronts. So I'm going to dive in. I'm noticing Sonia Neuenhouse is asking, we heard quite a bit about sisterhood and women getting together. Is there also a place for conversations with men about gender balance and gender equality? I would like to field this one. I was just working with the European Central Bank, one of our biggest clients. And let me tell you, first of all, Sonia, every program we do, this question comes up. We're here as women, we're doing this program, where are the men and why aren't the men here? And again, at the ECB, the question was, when can we start training men on this program, on why gender balance and leadership matters? And first of all, I invite you to join the program and help us tackle this really interesting issue. Because in our experience, an individual man, of course, just like an individual woman registers somewhere on a spectrum of bias and somewhere on a spectrum of stereotypical behavior. You know, you may have men who are very feminine in their orientation, and they might also be expressing less bias, gender bias than most. But as a general rule, whether it's gender or ethnic or whatever kind of bias, someone who is benefiting from bias is not highly motivated to figure out his or her own bias and disrupt it. As a general rule, when you take away privilege from people who have that privilege because of bias, they experienced you removing the privilege as discrimination, when in fact you are just leveling the playing field. So what we discovered in EQUO is that if you invite men to a program, to talk it out with men and women, you either get a very combative kind of program, or you get a guy who's come along with his girlfriend and he sits in the corner and he's like, I'm just not going to say anything. So what we are trying to do inside organizations is create a conversation, a threshold for change that starts to look at gender balance, not only from a social justice perspective, but also from the organizational strategic value. Because once you start getting men and women discussing the value of creating an inclusive climate, creating more gender balance in decision-making, you are having conversations about the shared value for the organization. And those tend to be more powerful than just going in and saying, okay, here, we're going to solve the problem this way. And it feels like discrimination to men all of a sudden. So yes, please do come and join us, because we haven't cracked that nut completely. Hanneke, do you have any things you want to add to that? Really great question.
Oh yeah, and I do think that's quite a challenge. I do believe you can actually engage men in leadership positions from the perspective that it makes their organization better. And we do experience that right now in RSM, where we are actually implementing or developing and implementing gender equality plans. And there's a lot of enthusiasm among the completely male leadership, I should say. We still need to work on that ourselves. If you look at the executive board, we now have one woman on the executive board, but they do feel that changing procedures, changing regulations, and putting a gender lens on it, that it makes their organization better and makes them look good. So in that way, you can engage. When I started in this line of work, I should say, I was always hoping that people would be intrinsically motivated. Don't hope for that. They're usually extrinsically motivated. And only will join you once they see that the outside world is asking for it. And of course, there's these few men that do feel intrinsically that they want to contribute and see that this will make things better for both men and women, but there's only a few of them. That was my lesson learned.
But finding male allies is an important part of the process inside organizations, and particularly when those male allies have power at the top. So it's that's, I think, part and parcel of strategic alliances.
Yeah.
Maybe and also Diane always used to say to everyone, not everyone has to have the same reason for achieving the same goal. Sometimes you can get together with people who have different reasons for achieving the same goal and work together. And I think that maybe some of the how do you get men involved might involve that consideration. Another great question.
Can I make one remark to the previous question?
Please, Carla.
I had most success with getting men engaged with men that have daughters. So managers with daughters, colleagues with daughters, I could have very valuable conversations with, and actually I managed some change. So there is, and also there's the he for she campaign.
Mm-hmm.
If you type that on the internet, I referred those people to watch that YouTube video. So men with daughters tend to be very acceptable, successful for reasoning.
Absolutely. Another question, I think Chantal's asking it on behalf of someone who doesn't have access to the Q&A function. Would you recommend developing and enhancing the more traditionally male type of behavior in the career context in order to make yourself seen? So do you need to act like a man in order to be visible?
Well, I completely disagree. Sorry. Yeah. I think the strength lies in staying close to your own values, I do believe that you need to realize the organization that you are in, how things work. But I truly believe that by staying close to your own values and choosing your own path within the boundaries of your organization and being aware of your organization is the way to go. And I would never, ever try to behave like a man. I think that's something that's actually keeping us back. If we would start doing that, we'd be creating women acting like men, and nothing will change because we're simply not embracing the diversity that we bring in and the added value that it has.
Carla, your thoughts?
I have worked in engineering only, and I have to say, sometimes to get to a certain position, I had to act very manlike. You know, show the confidence, be very risk-taking. Although once getting to the position, I could more relax and I could be more myself, and there is the true value, like Hanneke says. But because then being authentic, I could be authentic, I could actually act as a woman and also show that I bring to the table what was necessary. So I hated that sometimes I had to act inauthentic and very male-like in order to get to a position. But once getting there, being myself, that's where I bring the value to the organization. So that's the most valuable. That's how I could show that these female qualities are needed and should be valued. So I agree with what Hanneke is saying. We should act being ourselves and prove that we bring to the table what the company needs. So yes, I hope that answers the question.
Well, you know what, it provides different perspectives, and that's really echoing the value of diversity. Like, it's entirely possible that there's a lot of value in both those answers, and that situationally, depending on the person, the organization, the goals, all that you would really want to have a conversation with the people you trust, with your, you know, sisterhood, to kind of think, okay, is this a time in order to make myself visible? Do I really want to stick to my guns here? Do I want to modify a little bit, you know, and get that sort of feedback? It's a big question in the world of gender balance, and one that just keeps on going on. And I don't know if we'll ever have a 100% answer for you. I noticed that Ana Paula, yes?
Sorry, I have something to add actually, because of
Please.
what Carla said. I think one of the skills that you can actually learn is to navigate between the different leadership styles, and being able to do so and not stick to one style, but sensing what the situation requires. Well, of course, remaining close to yourself, I think is a very powerful weapon in the fight upwards. So I should add that. But you should only do this if you feel up to it. And some people say, hey, I don't want to do that.
It's the authenticity word. What does authenticity mean? My TEDx talk, where there's a link, is called Authenticity is a Dangerous Word. But I think that's mostly because we kind of confuse comfort sometimes with authenticity, and that's not what authenticity is. Sometimes feeling uncomfortable and taking a risk is a very authentic thing to do. Next question, Ana Paula. I'm 27 years, and I don't know if my age is right for the MBA programs. I'm going to dive in and say I knew a whole bunch of MBAs who were 27 or 28. So, but I'll let Lita dive in and give her thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you, Dorothy. So it doesn't depend on your age, actually. We do have people in our program that are 27, even younger. I would say it has to do with what your motivation is. Why would you want to do an MBA? what have you done so far in your professional trajectory? What would you hope to get out of the program? Where would you like to see yourself? Would it make sense for you to wait a couple of years? Because we do have people that say, yeah, you know, I'd like to wait a couple of years until I officially do this or that and then come into the program. So there's no right answer to this question. I would say it would depend, and that's why we have individual consultation sessions with every single person that decides to join or not join our programs. So I would say reach out to us, send us your LinkedIn profile or your CV, and we'll make sure to schedule maybe an individual discussion with you to make sure that this is the right timing for you personally.
And avail yourself of that offer. I think it's really invaluable to really consider what you're doing and get feedback. And, you know, RSM is a school that wants to make sure that it's the right school for you. So you'll get some clear and honest answers. Thank you, Lita. Priya Chowdhury, thank you for such an interesting and insightful session. You're welcome on behalf of the panelists. How should we handle emotional intelligence at work? Often it's considered in a negative way, especially for females. How should we ensure that there's a balance? And I love that question. It's a great one. And it sort of, that is a question that explains why there's a whole segment in our programming called Using Emotions Productively, and making a difference between having emotions and expressing emotions. Hanneke, Carla, what are your thoughts?
Well, it makes me think of one of the expressions of Diane Beverlander. She always says, "I'm not emotional, I'm being passionate." And that's what I think. And using your emotions effectively and sensing how to use them in different situations, I think is something great to be aware of and to learn to be aware of. And also to realize that we walk kind of a tightrope there as women. And so I love the question. I don't have a clear-cut answer, but perhaps Carla can supplement me.
Well, actually, what you mentioned, saying that you're passionate about work when you get emotional, that's also what came to my mind because of the sessions with Diane that I joined. One tip, one advice I think that is very general. Know when to realize when to stop, when you get too emotional, or when emotions are running high. It can be better actually to postpone a meeting or to cut a session when you have the option. I mean, you won't have always the option, but that's how I have always managed situations. When emotions run high and I felt out of control, I try to actually set a new date, a new time to attend it again, the issue.
Wonderful answer. Wonderful answer. From Carolyn Vangan, Carla, do you consider being confident as manly?
Well, in the corporate world, men are overconfident sometimes, and they are seen as well. They express themselves more confident. They are in decision making. Women tend to find more consensus, consult a few more team members, when men often intend to decide more on their own. So they are seen and considered to be more confident. No, confidence is not a male quality, but they express themselves more confident, and sometimes, like I said, overconfident. So that's the issue why, according to my opinion, quite some men, overconfident men, get to positions they're not competent for.
I'm looking up, this is why I seem a little bit weird, but because I'm looking up for you, and if I went into the EQUO headquarters WhatsApp group, I would find it. An article that appeared recently in Harvard Business Review about confidence, competence, confusion, and research, what research shows us. And I think it's important what you said, Carla, the difference between how people behave and what you perceive on the outside and the feelings inside. And that is where we tend to see a strange phenomenon, which is that women actually sometimes feel really confident on the inside, but their behavior on the outside does not give the impression of overconfidence as it is favored in male leaders. That's the research, one of the findings, there's plenty. But sometimes even when women are really confident, they're on the inside, they aren't demonstrating it with their face and their tone of voice and their gesture in the same way as it's perceived by men. So I think that if we have a moment, I'll try to find that article. It's fascinating.
Okay, great. Thank you for this.
Welcome.
Addition.
And then you get a thank you from Priya as well. Any other questions before we wrap up for the evening? I want to, while you're thinking, and if anyone wants to add a question, I am in the process of kind of reinventing my LinkedIn profile. I used to teach LinkedIn courses in the MBA about, how important, as a matter of fact, you probably don't know this, but the European headquarters for LinkedIn are here in the Netherlands. There's good reason for that. People are very, there's a lot of internet penetration here and always was before everyone else, but also very open society with LinkedIn. So that's all my way of saying there's no picture on there. There's no information at the moment, but please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and connect. I'm an open connector so that at the very least you can see some of the women who have attended the MBA in all of its many forms before and what they're doing and where they are now. And if you want to shoot me a question, that's fine. Lida, Chantal, Hanneke, Carla, last comments?
Well, I should say I truly enjoyed the discussion and the questions that came out. And so I hope this has been a very helpful session and an enjoyable session for everybody. It has been for me. And feel free to contact me as well. I'm also on LinkedIn and happy to connect and to discuss any other questions that you have. Thanks so much.
Carla, last thoughts?
Well, actually, same for me. I was, like I said, I'm pleased to be in this session. I really enjoyed it. If anybody would like to discuss anything where I can have added value with in the back of your mind, my experience that I shared, anything, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. And I'm open to discuss anything about gender equality and gender parity, inclusion in general. Thank you everybody for joining.
That's fantastic. What a wonderful offer. Thank you, Carla. Lida, do you have any last thoughts?
Thank you for me as well. And indeed, I would invite anyone interested in our MBA programs to reach out on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect you with people from specific industries or backgrounds, or people that you might have something in common with that also did the MBA. Maybe they can help you in your decision as well. And also, I'd like to thank Carla, Hanneke, and you, Dorothy, for being such a great moderator.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Lots of appreciation and thank you to the panelists indeed for in the chat box. Anna Paula, I noticed the comment about confident and rude. If you hit me up on LinkedIn, I'll give you my thoughts on the answer there. And for the rest, I would say whatever you do, wherever you go, don't think that you do not have it in you to lead not just yourself, but other women and your organization in this really critical issue. It's critical for you, it's critical for other women, and it's critical for society and economies all over the place. We encourage you to join ECWO's network, no matter where you are and whether you come to RSM or not. We will continue to advocate for more female leadership in organizations, and we will continue to build our network where you can start to get inspired and read people's stories like Carla's and understand what your role in this wonderful transition to gender balanced leadership might be. Our ECWO groups are on LinkedIn and on Facebook. If you can't find them, find us on LinkedIn and we'll help you get there. Have a wonderful rest of your day if you're in Argentina, a rest of your afternoon, or the rest of your evening wherever you are. And thank you for joining.